Earlier this week, just a few days ago actually, I was listening to NPR, and they started talking about this viral outbreak in Wuhan, a city with 11 million people, which serves as a major railway hub in the heartland of eastern China. When I first heard about it, they were reporting that some double-digit number of people had been infected, and a single-digit number of people had died. Then the next day, they covered the story again, except the number of infected people has gone way up, and the death toll has doubled. And the day after that was even worse, and this trend continued until it was obvious to all serious observers that this was a dangerous outbreak that was getting out of control. Now, this situation is particularly frightening because of the setting and the timing of the outbreak. The city of Wuhan is centrally located, so it's a huge hub for vehicle, rail, and plane traffic. People move through Wuhan all the time, and if they're exposed to a disease here, then that disease can be taken all over eastern China with the travelers. The timing is also really unfortunate, because China is about to celebrate the Lunar New Year's holiday. Much like Christmas in the West, this involves a lot of travel, with millions of people traveling by plane, train, or high-speed rail to reunite with family. If there's going to be a dangerous outbreak, this is really the worst place and the worst time for it to appear. A Chinese epidemiological study published on January 20th provides some context. The study reports, quote, "A cluster of pneumonia cases with an unknown cause occurred in Wuhan starting on December 21st, 2019, unquote. These pneumonia cases were investigated by the National Health Commission and the Chinese equivalent of the CDC, which sampled fluid from the lungs of some of these patients in the city of Wuhan. Using a variety of gene-reading technologies, they analyzed the bits and pieces of DNA that were recovered from the samples of lung fluid. And they reported, quote, 3 distinct strains have been identified. The virus has been designated as 2019 nCoV, and the disease has been subsequently named Novel Coronavirus Infected Pneumonia, NCIP, unquote. They placed this novel coronavirus in the Orthocoronavirinae subfamily and the Betacoronavirus genus. The common name that's being given to this virus is the Wuhan coronavirus, or the Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus. Now, not much is known about it, but we do know this. It has a brief incubation period before the symptoms start to show, usually around 3 to 6 days. The symptoms include fever and fatigue, low numbers of white blood cells, and extreme breathing difficulty, including shortness of breath, dry cough, and heavy mucus irritation. The sputum that fills the lungs leads to pneumonia-like symptoms, and in bad cases, it can even lead to death. The Chinese epidemiological study also mentioned the ongoing epidemiological research, saying, quote, "The origin of the 2019 nCoV is still being investigated. However, all current evidence points to wild animals sold illegally in the Huanan seafood wholesale market," unquote. This association with wild animals is pretty troubling. You might remember way back in 2003, when there was a massive SARS outbreak in China that killed almost 650 people. Well, SARS is also a coronavirus, and it was spread to humans through wild animals. Specifically, one of the bigger culprits of spreading SARS was the masked palm civet, which is a slender creature, somewhat raccoon-like in appearance and in ecological role, but more closely related to hyenas and mongooses. It lives all throughout southeastern Asia, including much of central, eastern, and southern China. Zhang Nenshan is a well-known scientist at the National Health Commission, and he participated in the epidemiological studies that sourced and identified the novel coronavirus. When interviewed by Chinese state media, Dr. Nenshan confirmed everyone's worst fears. He said, quote, that there is the phenomenon of human-to-human transmission, unquote. The important thing here is that they've determined that human-to-human transmission is possible, not just animal-to-human. And this human-to-human transmission is currently happening, which means that it has the potential to spread across the country, across the continent, and across the world. Dr. Nanshan pointed out that 2 of his patients in the southern province of Guangdong were infected by family members who had recently visited Wuhan. Alright, so let's look at the timeline of this outbreak. The first real signs of something serious came about during the last few days of 2019. Leading up to this, there were a number of strange pneumonia cases that were reported in Wuhan, and eventually these caught the attention of the Wuhan Municipal Health Committee, and they made an announcement by December 30th. The next day, December 31st, 27 people with pneumonia of an unknown cause were reported to the World Health Organization. Most of these patients were workers or merchants at the Huanan seafood wholesale market. And by January 1st, 2020, the seafood market was closed down for cleaning and disinfecting. And during this time, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau all stepped up border security and screening processes for incoming travelers. And by January 3rd, Thailand and Singapore had stepped up their security too. On January 5th, the number of suspected cases increased to 59. Early investigations had ruled out several pathogens as the cause, including SARS, MERS, and bird flu. But they hadn't confirmed a culprit yet. They hadn't yet identified the specific species of coronavirus. They also had not yet confirmed human-to-human transmission. On January 9th, the World Health Organization and the Chinese government confirmed that the cause of the strange pneumonia was a novel coronavirus, which had been isolated from fluid samples taken from a hospitalized patient in Wuhan. Other patients were also tested, and out of all of the suspected cases, they confirmed that 41 were from the novel coronavirus. This same day, the coronavirus took its first life. This patient was an older man who had several health complications. He was 61 years old, and he had abdominal tumors and a chronic liver disease. He was also a regular customer at the Huanan seafood market. The cause of death was heart failure and pneumonia, caused by the coronavirus. On January 10th, samples of the coronavirus were sent off to multiple labs for genetic sequencing. On January 12th, the Hubei province's Liangui began. This Liangui is a formal event where governmental officials at high and low rank all meet together to discuss and share information and make plans for the future. The Liangui for Hubei province took place in where else but Wuhan, which means that all of these government representatives and all of their staff from all over the province and the country are all coming to the disease hotspot. They're all coming to ground zero, and they'll stay here for several weeks before returning home, where they might spread the virus. On January 13th, Thailand confirmed the first case of coronavirus outside of China. The patient in Thailand was a 61-year-old Chinese woman who had lived in Wuhan and who had visited various food markets, but she also reported that she had not visited the Huanan seafood market. This is kind of worrisome because it suggests that the disease is spreading from the Huanan market to other markets. On January 14th, it was noticed that 2 of the 41 confirmed cases were a married couple, and that suggested human-to-human transmission. The next day, on the 15th, the coronavirus took a second life. This victim was a 69-year-old man. He had come to the hospital on December 31st and was observed to have severe myocarditis and damage to multiple organs. This same day, the World Health Organization published a newly devised testing protocol for detecting the 2019 nCoV strain of coronavirus. On January 16th, Japan confirmed its first case, and the next day, January 17th, Thailand confirmed its second case. Both new cases were from people who had contact with individuals living in Wuhan. Another 4 cases were confirmed in China, bringing the total to 45. On January 18th, China confirmed another 17 cases, bringing the total to 62. In Wuhan, the government organized an annual dinner event, which was attended by some 40,000 families who all shared meals and ate together, and this was a huge opportunity for the virus to spread. On January 19th, China reported the first confirmed cases outside Hubei province. One case was in Guangdong province, and another 2 were in Beijing. In Wuhan itself, there were another 136 confirmed cases, bringing the total up to 201, and another person died, bringing the death toll up to 3. January 20th, South Korea reports its first confirmed case. In China, Beijing reports another 3 cases, Guangdong province reports another 13 cases, and Shanghai reported its first confirmed case, on top of all of the new cases from Wuhan and Hubei province, which brings the total to 291. The death toll doubled to 6. This was also the day that the Chinese National Health Commission published its study confirming transmission between humans. January 21st, the World Health Organization announces an emergency meeting over the Chinese coronavirus. New cases were popping up all over China, bringing the confirmed case total to 440, with 9 deaths. New cases were also appearing outside of China, like in Taiwan and the United States. In the US, the first case appeared in Washington state. The patient is an unnamed man in his 30s who had recently traveled to Wuhan and is now being kept in isolation in Providence Regional Medical Center. This patient had arrived in the US a few days before health screening measures were enacted, so he was able to slip by before any defenses were raised. But since then, health screening measures have been put in place, so additional cases in the US caused by incoming travelers should be relatively minimal. January 22nd, the number of new cases skyrockets. In China, the number of new cases has risen to 571, and the death toll is now 17, which is almost double what it was yesterday. The government began quarantining Wuhan, canceling outgoing flights and trains. However, these early measures were only partially effective, as more than 100,000 people were still able to leave the city. Some people took antipyretics to reduce their fever symptoms so that they could sneak past the screening process. Unfortunately, this won't cure them or make them better, but it will suppress their symptoms long enough for them to escape the quarantine and get out into the countryside or to some other city where their symptoms will come back and they will most likely spread the virus. January 23rd, more new cases appeared in China, bringing the total to 830 cases and 25 deaths. There were also new cases outside of China, including the first confirmed cases in Singapore and Vietnam. All public transport in Wuhan was suspended, and all outbound trains and flights were canceled. Wuhan, a city of 7.5 million, has been effectively quarantined. January 24th, 10 more cities surrounding Wuhan were also quarantined, bringing the total population under quarantine to more than 35 million. The caseload in China rose rapidly, with 1,287 total cases confirmed by midnight. The death toll has shot up to 41, which is a little less than twice what it was the day before. 70,000 theaters across China are closed down, major tourist sites are closed down, and even big companies like Starbucks and McDonald's have begun to suspend some of their Chinese operations. More cases appeared in other countries, including Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and the US. And new cases were also confirmed for the first time in Nepal and France. The 3 cases in France are the first cases of this novel coronavirus to appear in Europe, and if comments by French health officials are anything to go by, these cases are not going to be the last. During the SARS outbreak in 2003, in order to accommodate all of the infection patients, the Chinese government built the Zhaotangsheng Hospital in 7 days. And for this current outbreak, the government is rapid building a new hospital that will have 1,000 beds. The work began on Friday, January 24th. And early in the morning the next day, on Saturday, the 25th, the government announced that they will build another emergency hospital with 1,300 beds. This second announcement has provoked fears and paranoia, as rumors on social media suggest that the government is not telling the truth about the full extent and danger of the outbreak. And these rumors aren't completely unfounded. I mean, first and foremost, the Chinese government is concerned about PR. It wants to look like it's able to get the disease under control. It wants to look capable. It wants to look like it has its house in order. And it also wants to avoid public panic. So it's entirely possible that all of these reported numbers, all of these reported cases, are at best underestimates. And at worst, the government is actively censoring the number of cases to keep public fear under control. Scientists at the Center for Global Infectious Disease Analysis at Imperial College in London published a paper on January 16th that estimated that over 1,700 people have been infected. Shortly after this paper was published, there was more cases reported outside of China, like the 2 cases in Taiwan and the 1 in Japan, and this compelled the researchers to modify their estimate on January 18th to be closer to 4,000 cases in Wuhan alone. At the same time, when the scientists from the Imperial College in London were making their estimates and modifying their estimates, at the same time, the Chinese government had reported that there were only 45 cases. Now today is January 25th. 30 of the 31 provinces in mainland China have declared a highest-level health emergency, with isolated Tibet being the only exception. More than 1,600 medical personnel have been brought into the Wuhan area to address the crisis, and outside of China, Malaysia and Australia have reported their first cases. Alright, so this is the story so far. I'll try and keep you updated if and when any big developments come along. For now, the number of cases in China is steadily increasing, and right now it's somewhere near 1,300 cases. The death toll is also growing. At least one person has died today, a 62-year-old Chinese doctor from the Hubei province, who succumbed to the coronavirus this morning. Hopefully, Chinese medical officials can get a grasp on this outbreak, and hopefully its spread across the world can be slowed, contained, and eliminated. Right now, the death toll remains low compared to the 2003 SARS outbreak, and we all hope that it stays that way. I have trust in our modern institutions. I believe that they can handle this crisis, as we have very sophisticated epidemiological, virological, immunological, and medical sciences. We have multiple global health organizations that are all working to fight this outbreak. So I'll come back to this topic eventually. But for now, these are some up-to-date facts and a history of this dangerous coronavirus outbreak.